As the MC has said, I wanted to talk to you about the immigrant contributions, the untold story. The reason I said the untold story is we often hear about the challenges immigrants have in our communities. We rarely hear about what immigrants contribute to our lives. And in a country that really depends so much on immigration and immigrants, that's a pity. So what I hope tonight is give you some analysis of what we have learned in the past 30-some years at an organization called Ottawa Community Immigrant Services Organization, which essentially works with immigrants and takes an integrated and holistic approach to ensure that immigrants have a journey, in the journey of making Ottawa their home, make that process a bit less hassle-some. Is there such a word? And less complicated. We know it's complex, but it's not really complicated, actually. But before I start my talk, I must mention the fact that I came to Canada as a refugee 23 years ago. And I have, in the past 23 years, had the privilege of living in this community, working in this community, learning in this community, and really experienced a whole lot of personal change and growth in this community. And I think most of that is as a result of the fact that I was privileged enough to work with people who are really, really passionate about the kind of work they do, and people who are very much interested in the whole integrative notion of how the world happens and the whole complexity and working together and finding solutions, which are not necessarily too obvious sometimes, but if we put our heads together as a collective group, have been really trying to find solutions to all kinds of interesting challenges in our community. So the stories I'll tell you, and I won't get to specifics of any particular stories, but I'll tell you what we have learned in the last 30-some years, as I mentioned. My hope is these stories will contribute to deconstruct some of the stereotypes about immigrants that tend to make their lives so difficult. These misconceptions about who the immigrants are and the value they bring to our communities really rob us of the gift immigrants bring to our communities. So not realizing that immigrants come to us with all kinds of gifts, we tend to warehouse them. We tend to not tap into their potentials, and both the immigrant and the communities to which they come pay the consequences. But before I start my conversation, I must mention the fact, obviously, that immigrants are not homogeneous. And I should also mention that all refugees are immigrant, not all immigrants are refugees. Immigrants come from various socio-cultural backgrounds, education, and skills that they bring to our communities. I'll start my conversation by saying immigrants are assets to our city, and that's, by the way, OCISO's vision. Assets to our communities and their contributions in business, social, and cultural aspects of our communities transform our lives. A recent report by the Conference Board of Canada captures this in one sentence, and I'd like to quote that. By virtue of the fact that immigrants have left what they know for something and somewhere that they may not necessarily know, they have demonstrated courage and stamina, characteristics that bode well for their future success and for their ultimate contribution to the society in general. Economically, immigrants bring necessary skills. In fact, some of you may know, immigrants are four times more likely to have a university degree than average Canadian. And they also bring, obviously, two skills to our workforce. Immigrants also develop their own businesses, create jobs, and facilitate connections to the international markets in a global and interconnected world. We know that the need for immigrants to boost our economy will continue for quite some time. So the need we have for immigration for our workforce will not end today. The Conference of Board of Canada, again, estimates that Canada will require about 350,000 immigrants a year by the year 2030 in order to keep its workforce growing. This makes it an economic imperative to unlock immigrant potential and to address our labor market needs. This will allow us the opportunity to remain competitive, to access international markets, and to generate great profits to invest into the development of our communities. Immigrants also bring creativity, innovation, and new ideas that are necessary for the sustainability and renewal of our communities. And tonight you have heard some aspect of the whole design theory and integrative thinking. And creativity is, in fact, at OCISO, where I work, we have something called a culture of respect. And what we start with is every person that comes to our community has a gift to give and has a unique potential to give to our society. And just from that thinking, the way we do work changes. And we see the potential of just getting people together and organizing about things that seem almost impossible to deal with become actually doable. And we have seen that over and over in the past many years of our work. So this creativity is quite necessary for the renewal of our communities and obviously to deal with the multiplicity of the challenges that we are facing. They also bring new ways of thinking and seeing the world. And new and groundbreaking research gives us new insights on how the brain works and how creativity is necessary in the 21st century to build productive societies. Daniel Pink's Whole New Mind discusses how the characteristics of the right side of our brain, such as creativity, intuition, seeing the big picture, are in short supply in our societies. In other words, I quote, "The future belongs to a person with a different kind of mind, designers, inventors, storytellers. These are," end of quote. "These are the creative and emphatic thinkers," Pink argues. Immigrants' new experiences, their openness and commitment to change and renewal lends itself to creativity, of course. Through their sense of community, social connections, and responsibility to one another, immigrants bring strong family values, support for charities, and communities at large. Community is at the core of everything in many cultures, represented by the immigrant. The concept Sangha, and obviously I won't talk about many other concepts because of the limited time, but I'll just mention a few of them. The concept of Sangha in Buddhism is a community where there should be harmony and peace and understanding. In Islam, every act of kindness is sadaqah, which is charity. And we're also told in Islam that wealth is only yours once you have given it away. The immigrants' holistic and integrated approaches to community building, particularly at a time where we're experiencing a marked decline in our social capital, will help us realize the importance of social relations for our well-being. And some of you may know Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone. Our hope is it will change our approach, inspire us to do things differently, and realize that, to quote Philstein, this is a social thinker as well, we need to look at front porches as crime-fighting tool, treat picnics as public health efforts, and see choral groups as occasions of democracy. Take a moment to imagine that community, by the way. I'll give you a moment to imagine that community. At OCISO, we see multiple examples of reciprocal exchange of social support and mutual obligations. Among the many immigrants we see, from the business person to the social worker to the teacher to the artist to the community leader and volunteers, we see so many people really wanting to make our communities different and wanting to make a difference in our communities. As I said, because of the time, I won't get to specific stories, but I want us to think about a couple of questions. Now, if immigrants are making such a difference in our lives, why is it that immigrants' story is not linked to success? Why are the tone and direction of our public discourse and around immigration and immigrants so negative? Why does the success part of the immigrant story never show up in the media? There are a number of reasons why we tend to not see the gifts that immigrants bring to our communities. Because of the limited time, I will look into just a couple of them. My analysis, I must say, is based on the observations and the work OCISO has been doing in the past 33 years, and my own research on immigrants and leadership in our communities. I think part of the answer lies, while we are beginning to appreciate the potential of immigrants and the talented pool that come to our communities, there tends to be very limited understanding of the entirety of the immigrant. Not many of us know, for example, that many of the immigrants that come to our communities come from countries that actually have various cultures and are heterogeneous in many ways, countries like India and Ghana. Others who come from somewhat homogeneous countries like Somalia have been exposed to cultural differences and may appreciate cultural difference as part of the strength of Canada. Take my personal example for my personal story. My family is composed through marriage, composed of multiple nationalities, and I won't count what they are, close to 20. In Somalia, and it's because it's through marriage, in Somalia the word hidid is also used the root of the tree, which speaks to how deep those family connections are. Growing up in Somalia, I was reading novels in English, romance magazines in Italian, poetry in Arabic. I watched Bollywood movies in Hindi, Rambo movies in Italian, and documentaries in French. Now, don't ask me if I speak all these languages now. My claim is it's part of the refugee experience. Some of those languages just got deleted from my brain. And by the way, there is actually research that shows that the new brain theory, we're beginning to appreciate what happens in traumatic situations. And in fact, the refugee experience, new research from London, is compared to trauma tree, which actually changed some genetic makeup of people's minds. And that's research, it's not my own analysis. I won't delve into that. So having been exposed to these many cultures, I grew up seeing cultural difference as enriching and really something beautiful, never as deficiency and problematic. Now, while I may not have had choice in where I ended up coming to Canada as a refugee, I love Canada and feel at home in many ways, precisely because of our willingness to continue to experiment on social diversity and because of our differences. The other reason we are not able to appreciate immigrants' contribution is our lack of understanding, core understanding actually I should say, of our history and experiences with immigration and multiculturalism. New research shows that we have a long history of living with cultural diversity, starting with Aboriginals. John Ralston Saul, the Canadian philosopher, argues, for example, we are heavily influenced and shaped by Aboriginal ideas. Ideas like egalitarianism, a proper balance between individual and group, a penchant for negotiation over violence, and are all Aboriginal values that Canada absorbed, Ralston argues. Our history includes the experiences of multiplicity of communities that make up our wonderful land. Unfortunately, our public school curriculum does not really reflect all these cultures and experiences, and in fact continues to raise important aspects of our past. This lack of adequate understanding of our past leads to erroneous assumptions, biases, stereotypes, and prejudices about some communities, and in fact, confusion about our own identity as Canadians. If we are adrift today, Saul argues, quote, it is because we refuse to accept who we are, who we were and still are. I think getting to know our ancestry will illustrate that our past is full of rich cultures with a spirit of community, respect, courage, generosity, a sense of justice, and self-determination. Knowing our history will also help us understand that the assumption that our unique multiculturalism policy promotes ethnic separation, and you may have heard a lot of that talk lately, has no empirical support, and that our fear of the other is completely unfounded. things are actually working much better than is commonly known in Canada. Canada does better than any other country in the world in the integration of immigrants. In fact, of all the indicators of integration, language acquisition, citizenship acquisition, political participation, and participation in social services, Canada outperforms many countries, and that's thanks to our adoption of multiculturalism policy. While as Canadians, we may have some anxieties around immigration and multiculturalism, we're generally open to people from other cultures and consider diversity to be the salient identity feature in our society, a new research actually found. Now, countries in the world are competing to attract immigrants because of their aging population and the need for a more educated workforce in the knowledge economy to fulfill their labor market demands. We have a lot of work to do. We do have what it takes, however. It's a lot of work, but we can do it. But we need to find the courage and the creativity to unleash the energy immigrants bring to transform our communities. While we think about this courage, it's critical to be honest about the conversation and really, really think about our collective and shared responsibilities and ensuring that there are necessary foundations of respect in place for each resident to realize their unique economic and social potential in our communities. I would like to leave you with a few questions that would help us refocus and build our communities. How can we support our communities and institutions to benefit from the gifts of immigrants and be open to shift some of their thinking? How can we collectively build citizens that are engaged, feel connected to their communities, and are interested in building a better future for all of us, instead of fragmented communities that view each other with suspicion and tend to be afraid of each other? How can we interrupt patterns of social isolation and promote a culture of respect in all our communities? I think given the importance of immigration to the future viability of our country, these questions must be what preoccupy us, and bring us together to build a peaceful, socially inclusive, open, democratic, and pluralistic society. As we deliberate on these questions, however, it's important that we start from a place of respect for each person and for diverse cultures to create positive changes. We must have the courage again to imagine and believe that we can collectively create the community we want. But we need to go beyond what it is and imagine the possibilities of what could be as we deal with the increasing deepening poverty rates, economic crisis, and ecological deterioration. Finally, our vision of Canada must take the important changes in the face of our community into consideration. Conversations on where we would like to go as a nation must have all of us sitting at the table if we were to build a healthy and prosperous Canada that continues to successfully compete in a globalized and interconnected world. Peace.